The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm quite moved to respond to some of the comments that have been made in here. It's been emotional for me to listen to some of the criticisms today, the past week. And as you can look at me, you can see I'm African Nova Scotian. So I will speak to that. I know the opposition is opposed to the bill, and they're against it, and they bring some great arguments. But, Mr. Speaker, that doesn't make you a champion for the community. African Nova Scotians have, and we've heard this over the last number of years, educators have heard it for years. It's a challenge that we've had to face for a couple of hundred years. Mr. Speaker, you don't know what it's like to be me. I was a child in that education system. Mr. Speaker, I've had great educators in that system. I'm a product of some of those educators. Unlike many of my colleagues in my community, I've had not one educator that looked like me. So that's a testament to those educators. My colleagues, my community members, many of them at least had one. I've never had one. So I will tell you, I am very proud of those educators who gave me some tools, who provided me with the confidence to be who I am. Mr. Speaker, there are many educators in my past who have, over the past couple of years since I've been in this position, proud and disappointed in me. Mr. Speaker, this is not a role I take lightly. There are people that came before me, Wayne Adams, Yvonne Atwell, Percy Paris, whose shoulders I stand on. Mr. Speaker, I have been really challenged and bothered by what I say to some degree is a bit of, and I use this word cautiously, theatrics. I have people in the chamber here who have called out my community, who have talked about those individuals in the community. As I started with, take your blinders off, look at me. I'm African Nova Scotian. I've taken this role, and many people in the community know that I've taken this role to advocate on their behalf. Many of them have been around the table long before I got into this position, talking to me about those challenges that are within the system, a systemic system. We are looking at dealing with a systemic issue here. Mr. Speaker, when My colleagues in the third party were in power. Mr. Speaker, they were privy to some of the challenges that my community had faced. One, for example, the Home for Colored Children. That issue sat around for years. Where was the advocacy there? I can point to many other issues, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to stand here and give you a litany and a list of all those things. But, Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind all that often the opposition begins with, "This government doesn't listen." Mr. Speaker, let's not try to divide things and put things into a different perspective, because when we talk about government, that includes every one of us sitting here. Government. Whether you're a ruling party or not, you're sitting here and you are making decisions as well. Mr. Speaker, government has not listened. It came from their words. Government has not listened. Mr. Speaker, government hasn't listened for years. The education system, those issues that everybody keeps raising, aren't new issues. 2012, the NSTU went after the opposition for decisions they were making. This is not new. And to try to point it and paint it all as a current picture is wrong and disingenuous. Mr. Speaker, we, all of us sitting here, all of us have a part to play in this play. Mr. Speaker, I got involved in this because of some of the antics that I've seen in this House for years. I vowed, and I will keep that vow, that I would not do this and become involved in this without sitting down and really consciously thinking about some of the decisions that I make. You may not agree with them, but you know what? Isn't that what democracy is about? You may not agree with all my decisions. And you know what? I've learned, especially from some of those earlier educators that have taught me, we can learn to agree to disagree. Mr. Speaker, African Nova Scotians and those whose names have been thrown around this floor, one used it in law amendments. The gentleman stood up and spoke about my mother, spoke about how she encouraged him. He also didn't tell you that I also supported him. He also didn't tell you, and many others, that whenever they've come to me, I said I would ensure, I don't take this role lightly, I would ensure that I bring your concerns and your issues to the table. That doesn't mean that I can fix them. I said I would bring them to the table. This is a group effort. So, Mr. Speaker, we've come a long way. There's still a lot of work to do. But, Mr. Speaker, that work will not get done if there is loaded language thrown around this floor, not enabling us to try to come together and try to understand those issues that are really being laid out before us. Mr. Speaker, that language isn't helping us all. It's not helping us at all. Mr. Speaker, I know there are good people on all sides of this floor. I believe within my heart that there are individuals in here from the short period of time that they've gotten to know me, know that regardless of what political stripe you are, that I will try to work with you. But I had to get up today because I had individuals make comments like they're tired. The member from Truro mentioned she was tired. Imagine how I feel. Imagine how my community feels. You don't think I'm tired too? We've got to find a way to work better together. And I can assure you that the only difference, and this is what I've said out there in the community to many people, and I truly believe this right now. You may say whatever you want, but I believe the only difference between me, Percy Paris, or Wayne Adams is, now hear me, folks, I've got colleagues who are listening to me. I've got colleagues who are hearing me when I bring those community issues to them. That's the difference. Mr. Paris, others, Yvonne Atwell, and I can go on even municipally. Many of them have talked about the challenges of trying to be here. It's not an easy task when you're a visible minority sitting in a place like this. The community doesn't trust you, and within this government, not just my party, there are people who don't trust me either. They're wondering what my agenda is. Well, I'm going to ask all of you, what's your motivation? Mr. Speaker, there are challenges within a system that, as I've said out there in the communities, the true story, the true history of people of African descent, of Acadian, of Mi'kmaq, have to be told. We are sitting in a situation where systemically, if those stories aren't truly told to its fullest degree, we will continue to have this debate and play this game for the next 100 years. So I ask you, please, make your points, express your opposition, but I also ask you to stop acting like you are protectors of the community. Because, Mr. Speaker, look what protecting us has done to us. Mr. Speaker, we don't need protectors. We need allies. And if you think that this approach is helpful to bee protectors for African Nova Scotians, you have much more learning and listening to do. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to leave you with a couple of quotes, and then I'm going to take my seat because, as most people know around here, if I get going, then I'm going to get too emotional and get too mouthy. So, I'll leave you with a couple of quotes. I ask you to really consider what I've had to say today, and I'm talking to anybody, Mr. Speaker, who might be listening, anybody who's up in the gallery who thinks that there is only one way. I'm speaking to the unions, all of you. You got to wake up, because you're talking about waking a giant. If we continue this, you guys haven't seen what I could be like. So, Mr. Speaker, the first quote I will leave with you by Dr. Mae Jemison: "Never be limited by other people's limited imaginations." And the last quote I will leave with you is by James Baldwin. Mr. Speaker, he had said, "Those who say it can't be done are usually interrupted by those doing." Thank you.